Johnny Fontana, Real World NF Scorpio, back with another video. Today's the day. You've asked for it, and now I'm going to give it to you.
Okay, let's put that on the wayside. Here's another critique. One I personally could never get around. He says, look, all the greatest thinkers in history, this is actually an Ibn Taymiyyah critique of logic. He says, look, all the greatest thinkers in history all disagree. Like Plato and Aristotle, Plato tutored Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
Two of the greatest thinkers in ancient history. They don't agree with one another. They both say you're wrong, and the other guy says I'm wrong. Okay, fast forward. Every generation, their greatest thinkers disagreed. Leibniz didn't agree with Voltaire. Today, Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, maybe they're not the top intellectuals of our on Earth today, but they're among the elite. They don't agree on what is true. When you ask them what's truth, you guys are talking about truth all day long. Can you define it for us? We don't agree. So if logic is something that tells us about the world, if it is, let's say we grant that, Descartes saying, look, we can't use it. Nobody's good enough to use it and get to a conclusion that everybody agrees upon. So he's saying, look, even that doesn't help me.
So I've had 5, right? Emails regarding what I thought about the Thai police. He goes, hey, you're going to be coming up soon. And I told them, and like, let me give you perspective. Number 1, I like Eric. Okay? I appreciate what he does. He's an ENTP. I consider my father an ENTP. Obviously, my father was brought up in Europe. So again, different functions, okay, are cultivated because he grew up he was in the UN for 20 years, lived in various countries. So his environment contributed to a lot of his thought patterns and so forth, and also he basically had his first child, me, at 20, and had 4 children by the time he was 25, right? So he had to grow up a certain way, and certain functions, develop differently, okay? So obviously no 2 ENTPs are going to be the same. But I see a lot of similarities. I see how he works, and I think he's awesome, right? I think he's a great thinker. He has a lot to offer. He's very intelligent, and there's nothing wrong with what he's doing at a fundamental scale, right? In terms of teaching and educating people. However, as he said, because I've done research on him as well, because again, I used to be a cop. I used to be a detective. So of course, I'm going to, we can't miss the paradox. Even though I didn't like being a police officer, but I had to do the job, right? I'm a human being, I'm functional. So guess what? I use my investigative skills in order to figure out, okay, what this guy's talking about before I make these videos. So he even says it. He says, hey, INFJs don't have the logic for him, right? Or for what he does. We're more people, social. That's a given. Listen, I'm going to repeat it, but this is perspective.
A lot of guys, they come into the game thinking that it's going to be something that they can very easily deconstruct and create a formula to deal with. And the truth is far different. It's interesting because I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to the game, because they think, okay, here are these rules that govern social interaction. And if I learn these rules, I learn these theories, I can protect myself. I can just, go down the flow chart and I'll never have to feel bad ever again. I do get a lot of engineers on boot camp, and I'm sure in some small part that's due to the fact that I live in Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area, and there are a lot of engineers here, and that's what attracts them to the game. This idea that it's something they can figure out. It's this puzzle, right? But in reality, game is not some simple arithmetic problem you could just plug quantities into to get a standardized result. An interaction is a living, breathing, dynamic thing where the variables are constantly changing in real time. Look, if every girl in the world behaved in exactly the same way, then sure, Mark's idea of practicing on one girl would work out just fine. But you know as well as I do that that is simply not the case. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Let's say that I'm interacting with a woman and I start to tell her one of my stories. And this is a story that I've told hundreds of times before to various people. All right. I know that at certain points in the story, people are likely to react a certain way and or say certain specific things. And these are what we call invisible threads. And that's an old school community term. And invisible threads, quote unquote, are basically made up of all the possible ways that a conversation could branch out from a given starting point. And once you've done enough interactions, thousands and thousands, you'll start to get a pretty good idea of what most of the invisible threads are for a given conversational topic, or a given story, or even a given theme of conversation. And once you know that, it becomes very easy for you to dominate the conversation and control the frame, because you'll basically have a prepared response for any contingency that might arise.
Okay, so Eric, he's like the engineer. He does the puzzles. Like if you watch everything he does on his scales and puzzles, boom, boom, boom. For me, it's again, people person. If I'm a people person, I cannot rely on tables. I have to go to Eric and say, hey, based on my gathering of information, I've come across this, and I've said, what do you think this is? You see what I'm saying to you? So, but again, the thing with Eric is that just like many of us don't realize, it's very difficult for us to hold different concepts in our minds. So a lot of what he says on one video, he'll contradict on another video, but he also acknowledges that. You see what I'm saying to you? So he'll say that, hey, like, I'm wrong here. Like, INFJs are this. And he'll go through an entire lecture of who INFJs are. But then he'll come and while he's typing someone on his type police, he'll say, oh, well, no, this is not this. But I'm like, well, like you just said that INFJs can do this to this, but then you're just limited to your own 5-minute video of that particular type. So again, like what I'm doing is that I'm acknowledging what he does, saying that he has even acknowledged himself. So I can't be mad at the guy. You see what I'm saying to you? I can't be mad at the guy. And not only that, and what bothers me, which is weird, is because it's like we're all functional. Like we're all like living. And that's why sometimes like I feel that the internet dumbs people down, because it's like, oh, well, INFJs, they can't do this or they can't do that. But then it's like, if the information is there, if I can go back to your library and research and pick up on some of the things that you said, I know where you're coming from. Like, you know what I'm saying to you? Like, I get it. Like, I
So Bertrand Russell said it beautifully. He said, look, at first in his career, Bertrand Russell is he's a great thinker. He said, look, mathematics is the thing we're most sure of. By the end of his career, he was like, guys, I'm not even sure about math anymore. Why? He's like, I think math is just another way of saying a four-legged animal is an animal. But you said that when you said it's four-legged animal. And you just repeated yourself by saying it's an animal. If I say, there's my wife, I married her. When I said my wife, I told you I married her. That's what math is doing. Math is giving you the information again in a simpler form that you can understand. And you think, oh, I've deduced this information. No, actually, the information was there in the question.
Right.
So that's why it's very, very, very odd to me how, like, we just miss the paradox, because we forget that there's so much content online, but yet we forget that we said you cannot rely on MBTI because it's this, that, and the third. But then, oh, this person's not an INFJ. This person's not an ENEP. This is that because that person didn't do this. But then it's like, like, that we don't agree. Like, of course, like Jordan doesn't agree with Harris, and this doesn't agree with Had, and Aristotle didn't agree with, such and such. So it's like, what is logic? You know what I'm saying to you? So for me, it's again, he does what he does and he does it great. I do what I do, and no INFJ on YouTube does it better than me. No one. No one presents from a social dynamic point of view and perspective like I do. Nobody does it. No one does what Eric does. No one does it. But no one does it like I do. Most of the INFJs online, all they do, they talk about the descriptions. They talk about parsing between INTP, INFJ, INFP, and all that. They talk about, they go into some weird spaces, some of them. Some of them are more into influencing and providing guidance and whatever. But no one really sits here and says, okay, I'm in a real world setting. I'm a performer. Because INFJs can be artists. So you cannot be artists in your own cocoon. You're going to eventually want to dance, or you want to perform, or you want to sing, or you want to play an instrument. You're going to have to perform, right? But when you're performing, you have to understand energies. You have to be able to read a crowd, be able to read body language. Okay, let me give you an example of reading body language and understanding culture.
I had a situation early in my career that got this all started for me, where I was on a trip to Japan with a Japanese colleague, and I gave a short presentation to a group of Japanese participants, and at the end of the presentation I asked them if they had any questions. When I looked at the group, no one raised their hands, so I went to sit down. My Japanese colleague then said to me, "Erin, I think actually there were some questions. Do you mind if I try?" And I said, "Okay, fine." So he then stood up, and again he said, any questions? And again no one raised their hand. But this time he looked very carefully at the group. "Oh, do you have a question?" And the woman said, "Well, thank you, I do." And she asked a fascinating question. And then he did it again. So afterwards I said to him, how did you know that these people had questions? And he said to me, "Well, it had to do with how bright their eyes were." And I thought, wow, they don't teach us that in Minnesota. So this was a very important experience for me because, well, there's an expression in Japanese which is kuki yomanai. They shorten it to KY, and it means someone who is unable to read the atmosphere, or someone who's unable to read the air, meaning to pick up the communication that's in the air. And here we could see that he clearly could read the air, and I was clearly KY. But I also saw that with a little bit of assistance and direction, that I also could become better at picking up those signals that were in the air.
You see what I'm saying to you? So that's not something that you just learn automatically. It's not through osmosis, right? So therefore, you have to be exposed to these things, okay? But I come from a social point of view, social dynamic point of view, understanding people, understanding how people interact with one another. But a lot of this is based on interactions with other people, seeing their body language and being able to now recall that, okay, for future reference, for future use. Eric, he's good at recalling all of these functions from a puzzle point of view, which is great. But guess what? What happens when you have someone who is been exposed to certain things, who comes from a more urbanized point of view, right? So someone like me, I had to run away from school bullies in Queens, New York. You know what I'm saying to you? I grew up around a lot of aggressive people, but yet I was shy. I'm introvert, right? I don't like going to big party. I don't like being. That's why I didn't like really being a cop, because too many people were just high strung and A-type personalities, and I couldn't deal with all the activities that they enjoyed doing. But yet I had to perform the job, right? Because I wanted to help people. That's what I wanted to do. But I realized, like helping people, there are two different types of helping people, and it also depends on where you are and who you work for. Some police departments prefer the more going out and get them because of the type of police department and the type of crime, and the other better neighborhoods, they just want you to patrol, right, and become a citizen, a citizen's angel, right, rather than going out there and patting people down at corner stores and so forth, because it's not a good look for the community and so forth, because it has a lot to do with taxes and all that. So there's a lot of perception that has a lot when it comes to ordinances and so forth and so on. But then again, you, as an INFJ, for me, I start to read these bigger pictures and understand these things, and I'll say, okay, now these are how things are connected and how people and why this. But because of my poor logic, I don't see it right then and there. It's not until afterwards, and I'm like, that's how all of these things work. And that's why, because again, I have to be introduced to something else. I start connecting. This is what connecting with that. This, that, and third, this, that, and third. So people say, oh, well, this on experience of this. Well, guess what? If you are in an environment where you have to use SI, you have to use it. Because as an SI individual, you have to be precise. Boom, 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 boom. When you're dealing with a lot of ESTJs, ESTPs, people who are just go, 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 you have to be on that level of go, 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 go. So then now you start to develop certain your functions that are go, 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 go. You may not do it as well, but you start to develop it. It starts to peak, right? Like as if he said, like he may not have whatever, but it starts to peak somewhere. But you sort of cultivate it to your own abilities, not as well as theirs. And you'll realize that a lot of the sensory types, they're good at remembering. Like I have a friend of mine we talked about before, in thinkers. He's a ISTJ or maybe INTTP or whatever, one of those. But the guy, like, he's been out of the electrical because he used to work on cars. He used to hook up radios, but he works as a train mechanic. Okay, but he, like 5 years ago, he used to work on car electronics, installing radios, speakers, and so forth and so on. But the guy, like, can remember, oh yeah, that's for Toyota and this and that. They use the blue and the green, whatever. But he remembers all that stuff, like wow. So but with me, I can remember, oh no, if a person does this, this usually means this usually means that, this means that. So I use that approach. But him, he can use when it comes to, that's why he's good with the admin stuff. He's very good with admin. He can remember, oh yeah, you just go to that, go under here. When I call him, he'll go into that section and go into here, go to there, and go there, and you'll find that link there. And for me, I'm like, I can't remember all of these things, right? But he's good at that. But again, because of me being around him, I start to pick up on some of these things because I'm like, yo, I need this stuff. Like, it's stuff that I need to learn. Like, because if I don't, then I'll be made fun of. Then it'll be constantly, oh, you don't know this, you don't know that. So you sort of have to, improve and adjust. And it's hard. It's like, going out and like meeting people. It's tough, right? Like, you don't want to do it. I don't want to, but the more you do it, the more, you start to realize, oh, okay, I can push through this. It's the same thing as when I would go on leave, right? And I would come back and I would have to make my first traffic stop, or my first domestic violence, or my first shots fired. It was like, ooh, but then you go through it, and it's the same as performance. You have performance anxiety, but as you're performing, you're in there, you're in that groove. It sort of like starts to flow, right? So it's with everything, right? And that's why certain people like me, I've been exposed to so many different avenues and career fields and people that I've developed different aspects, but because I had to use them, I was forced. So as a personal trainer, I had to use certain functions as a personal trainer. Now I know. Before I was a personal trainer, I didn't understand how to to lift weights or whatever. So now if you look at me here and then you look at me here, it's because of me learning and getting guidance through other personal trainers, other sensors who are really into that stuff. So for me, I go through periods where, like right now, you can see my face is, because I have a lot of water weight, but I've learned it's because of I'm not drinking enough water and having a lot of sodium, and that's what it does to my body. So you become more self-aware. But again, it's through dealing with other people, asking people questions and so forth. You see what I'm saying too? But I would not have known that. Same thing with auto mechanics. When I was in the military, I didn't know anything about cars, right? But then now it's like you go there, you start to realize certain things, and now you start picking things up. But then for me, if I go away from it, I'm not going to remember. Like, I lose it quickly. Whereas sensors, it's easy for them. Like when I was going through class, I realized that a lot of them were picking up on the new information. It's because it was just connecting the dots for them. Whereas for me, I was sitting there, I was like, do you realize that I've never been, in my mind, now this is what I'm thinking, I was like, do you realize that I'm not a sensor type, that I'm not a mechanic, but yet you guys are interacting with each other and talking about 57 Chevys and this, that, and third, and you're not really relating to me, and you're not really understanding that I learn differently, whereas we spend, 3 weeks, on PowerPoint by death, and then we only spend 1 day actually working hands-on with the vehicle, and these individuals are able to get it and connect the dots, where I'm here struggling to figure out how does the radiator work in the AC system, and like how does it go, and I'm failing in a test, and because I just can't get it. You see what I'm saying to you? Like, and I'm figuring out, and then that's when I'm like, oh, okay, that's why such and such and such does this, and such and such does this and that. And I realize how, in that class, like where you had people who were more aggressive, they were leaders, but they didn't know how to really deal with the people. Like, they didn't have the patience. So people would come to me and say, hey, we have a problem. The leaders, he's doing this, that, and third. And I would have to go and talk to the leaders. Hey, I know you guys are leaders. I'm not the leader, but I'm just giving you a heads up. You may want to take your approach, such and such, because I'm sitting in the back and I'm watching all of this and I'm seeing how everything goes. So again, and then we miss the paradox because people will sit here and say, oh, but he's actually, recalling everything. So therefore he's using this and that. Okay, but at the end of the day, how much experience do you have? Like, I'm telling you that I've lived in 7 different countries, right? I'm going to be moving again, and I'm giving all these experiences to my children. Like, I don't know what they are. So I have to be an intuitive type, and therefore I have to limit myself to my stack. But then I have children. My children, my daughter can be a this, or my son can be a that. Because like my daughter, she's good with dancing. She likes dancing. But my son, he's into music. He has good rhythm now. So he loves, music. So now I have to now limit myself to only me. And my wife now, she's the ESTP. She's very outgoing. Whatever. So I have to, ensure that I evolve, myself with her, or evolve myself to meet her needs. So then I have to be a certain way. You know what I'm saying to you? Like, I find that it's funny. Like when people are sitting behind, a camera, and they don't do anything in life. Like, they're not exposed to other things. They're not exposed to everything. Where someone like me, like I sat and I had to create policies for the federal government. You know what I'm saying to you? Like, I had to go to the White House and make meetings and attend meetings that actually affected, government policies. Like, this is big world-changing events, right? Like, I was, part of providing internal security for U.S. embassies, right, and councils in 3 countries. Okay, like, you know what I'm saying to you? Like, these are big things when you're meeting the defense attachés and the deputy chief of missions, and the regional security officers for embassies, and you're having discussions with them and you're figuring things out and you're understanding, like, you're traveling the world, you're understanding culture. Like, these things play a role. You see what I'm saying to you? So, like, how are you going to just limit me to just that, to just an INFJ, and say, well, because you said that, so therefore you're not that. You see what I'm saying to you? Like, but then we're chameleons. So we missed the paradox again on that. So if you're a chameleon, you can do this, you can do that, you can do that. But then when I now put myself in front of a camera, which was never the case before, it's just only now that we're actually doing this, you can now read me through a camera. So I'm doing something that we are normally, when the systems were being created, did not exist, where we sat there and we had discussions with people and explaining things from our point of view, right? And now we are, okay, characters, but yet we're being told that, oh, you're not this, you're not that. Like, let's get ahead. Producer, why don't you get ahead and show him that clip again.
So you actually have cultures now that are celebrating inauthenticity. Inauthenticity to the degree of, hey, you're really good at faking that. Now you take somebody like me, right, who's a freak by nature, you know what I mean? I'm just different, right? Right? You take me and you put me in a system like that, what am I supposed to do? Right? Because to be myself is to actually be counter to a system that's rewarding. And every time we walk into a situation, we have to encounter, in essence, a lesser version of what we're capable of. And we have to constantly be told that somehow that too much is not enough, which is really weird. It's like a woman who refuses to get plastic surgery and all her friends are like this at 55. You know, if people around her don't appreciate the fact that she's aging gracefully, well, you see, it inverts itself. So a band like Smashing Pumpkins sticks out precisely because we won't go along with the inversion. And every day I got to do an interview, or every day I got to deal with a fan who doesn't get that inversion. And all I can do is like, don't know what to tell you, dude. There's the old albums, you know. So anyway, oh, thank you. Thanks for coming.
You see what I'm saying to you? Like, that's it not bothers. Yeah, it bothers me. You see what I'm saying to you again? Because it's about the social interactions that we do. And that's where we differ. You have these guys who are just here. They're just intellects. That's what they do. All right. One more clip.
I mean, how the fuck would you know? You know, it's like, it's all through these different references. If you're just spending a lot of time, and this is everyone today, on the fucking computer, and then you go out in the real world, you have no idea. Because on the computer, guess what? There's a live video, a webinar. What's next to that fucking webinar? The chat box. Hey guys, dick pics and all this weird shit. And then you come to a seminar like this and you're like, I guess the chat box is I just speak up in front of everyone. Dick pics? Yes. No, it's the context. And again, it's like, it's harsh to say here, and again, I really appreciate it, and I do agree with everything you said, by the way. That's what I'm saying. The place it's coming from and what you're saying is fucking on point, but because it doesn't connect, it just kills. And you'll repel a lot of people just in terms of who you meet after this in your life if you don't start to it, because you could be the greatest guy, intentions, have the greatest ideas, but it won't click with other people because of that.
So we get into this point where now we just limit each other to this side and to this side, right? Not realizing that the information is here, that we need more versatility. You know, we need people who are versatile in here and here, who can then now mix and to be able to provide, you know, different types of individuals. And these are the people who actually do well. They are the ones who can actually maneuver through life. Because if you have just people who are just sitting behind, you know, their cameras and they're not exposed, they're not involved in other things, and guess what? Then they become this person. They don't make it or make for, you know, versatile people. They cannot provide, you know, counsel. They cannot provide, you know, experiences and perspective, because they only come from one perspective, right? And being that the information is there for us to take, it's like, bro, like, I saw what you said. I got it. Now I'm going to internalize all this information and I'm going to present it to you here, right? And then you're going to read, you're going to watch the video and be like, oh, you said that, you said this, you said that, so therefore you're this, you're that. But then I'm going to make a video and say, how come you didn't realize that because the information was there, that I didn't actually throw it out there to get a reaction out of you? Johnny Fontana, Real World and Scorpio, we out.